First of all, I'd like to congratulate the MMA for putting together such a fantastic program. Clearly, a lot of effort and thought has gone into this in terms of the design of the program, the sequence of various speakers, the panel sessions, and this doesn't happen easily, so my compliments to the organizers for doing something which has taken an enormous amount of your personal time. It's a pleasure to be on the panel with Swami Bodhananda and of course Nachiket, an old friend and a fellow journeyman in some of these issues that Nachiket spoke about so passionately. I'm going to just start by giving you a sense of my own life journey over the last several years, the choices that I've made, and then some learnings and takeaways from that for the theme that we've been asked to speak about. I'm a product of a middle-class family. My father used to work for the railways. In fact, he used to be in Chennai. His father used to work for the Imperial Bank of India. But just before I was born, he decided that he wanted to be an entrepreneur. So his father said, like any true Tambram would tell his son, no self-respecting Tamil Brahmin will start a business. So if you want to start a business, you can't be living in my house, which is when my father moved to Bangalore. And I was born and brought up in Bangalore. My wife is a Gujarati, also from a middle-class family, slightly more middle-class than us. Her father also was originally from Chennai, but like most Gujarati families, from a business family, and he wanted to become a professional. So guess what happened to him? His father said, no self-respecting Gujarati man will want to work for somebody else. So if you want to be a professional, you better get out of my house. So he came down to Bangalore just a few years before my parents did. And of course, we grew up not knowing that both of us were meant to be with each other. For about 18 years of our life, we didn't know each other. And then I met her one fateful day. She is my cousin's neighbor. And my life changed completely after that. Our story of getting married is like a Hindi movie. It has everything that you would see in a Hindi movie, including the over-the-top comedy scenes and the drama with the brothers and the parents and so on. We finally got married after a lot of struggle. She came from a very conservative family. And to this day, I maintain the single biggest achievement of my life is convincing my wife's parents to let her marry me. So, now, through all this, and I was in Pilani, I actually dropped out of college just to make sure that we could get married. So it's a really, really complicated story. But through all this, we had no sense of the larger India. We were typical products of a middle-class upbringing. I remember when I was growing up, there would be discussions about emergency, fierce debates about whether it was right or wrong. But they all used to happen around our coffee table. You know, my parents and my grandparents were resolving every problem of India in our breakfast room. And we didn't think that there was anything wrong with that, because I think that was the culture in which most of us have actually grown up, which is to see democracy like a spectator sport. That it's all happening out there, and somehow we don't have a role to play in that. That remained for us until we went overseas. My wife and I spent about 10 years overseas, most of which was in the US, and the last year and a half was in London. And we went abroad driven exactly by the same sentiments that most people leave, which is for a better life, to see the world, to make money, to understand whether what we believe in ourselves can indeed be shaped. And all of that came true, like it does for most NRI families and most Indians who go abroad and work hard. But something else happened which was very unexpected for us. As we lived in the US, and our life was pretty much circumscribed by living in the tri-state area, which is New York, New Jersey, Connecticut. We would very often, while living there, we would get these mailers in our mailbox, these colored sheets of paper saying, we're doing some volunteering, why don't you come and help out and so on. And my wife and I would just take that and dump it and say, who has the time for it? 5 days a week, we're really working hard and we want to spend time on the weekends with ourselves. Until we moved to Connecticut, which was slightly north of New York, we moved into a new town. And within a couple of weeks, the same thing happened. This thing came and saying, we're cleaning the local park, come on Sunday, we'll give beer afterwards and so on. And we said, who wants to clean the park? That's the responsibility of government. But for very selfish reasons, because we had just moved in, we didn't know our neighbors, we decided to go. So we went on Sunday morning. Somebody was there, he gave us a rucksack, he gave us some pitchforks and said, okay, clean up the leaves and the dirty stuff. So we did that for 2-3 hours. They gave us the beer. But all in all, it was nothing great. It was just another interesting Sunday morning. until Monday. I was standing at the train station at 6:30 in the morning to take the commuter train to Manhattan. When standing where Nachiket is sitting was a guy in a suit reading the Wall Street Journal, looking exactly like me. So I walked up to him and said, "Aren't you the chap from the yesterday's park cleanup operation?" And he said, "Yes." I said, "I thought you were some NGO, tree-hugging activist, environmental guy, but you look like me." And he said, "Yeah." So we talked on the ride in to the city. Just that 1 hour conversation was like an eye-opener. This was something that he took very seriously. His volunteerism, his caring for issues that mattered to him was a very important part of who he was. And that opened our eyes, and one thing led to another, and we saw a whole subculture of people who were giving time to issues that mattered to them. And within a few months of that, he actually invited us to the local community meeting where they were going to decide the budget of the local town. And in the school auditorium, this is on a Friday evening, in a room like this, like with people like this, about 200-300 people, we sit down and we watch the mayor of the town and a whole bunch of people, and the mayor welcomes everybody, and then he says, now I'm going to hand over to John Smith or whatever, who is co-chairing the finance committee. So John Smith gets up, this guy works for Merrill Lynch or whatever, and he says, "It's been a pleasure to be a co-chair of the finance committee over the last 1 year. This year, coming year, our capital expenditure budget is $10 million because the school committee wants to put up new computers, the parks committee wants to have some new toilets, but our budget, our capacity is only 6 million, so we need to prioritize." And over the next 20 minutes, in an amazing display of participation, average people like you and me are sitting up, making their point, debating issues. They put this to vote, and they make a call on this. And then the next guy comes, and the next guy, and in an hour or two, people have involved themselves in determining the issues that matter to them in their neighborhoods. And my wife and I, Swati and I, were sitting in the back and saying, what is going on here, This is completely different to this cardboard caricature called democracy that we've been carrying around. That, there's this politician and there's this bureaucrat, and somehow we, the good people, are going to whine about this stuff. Here, people are actually involved. They're doing something about this stuff. They're not just talking about it. And once that genie is let out of the bottle, there's no putting it back. So for us, it just began to consume our lives, to say, we could actually go back and do this, because everything that we had seen made us believe that it's possible back in India. It's not that we didn't want to do it, it's just that we didn't know any better. So all it needs is for us to go back and say there's another way. And all these societies that we are admiring, where people are doing all this, they didn't happen by accident. It wasn't something that the white man has. It's just that some generation of people before had put this in place. So we need to go back and do this. We had met our financial goals, we had met our professional goals. My wife is an architect and I was a banker. So the one thing we can credit ourselves for, I think, is that at the age of 33 and 34, we decided to bite the bullet, and we didn't move the goalpost. We didn't say, what about one more year, children are growing up and this and that. We just said, let's just go. So in 98, it has been 14 years, and I was just joking to people that we've completed our Vanavas now, 14 years since we came back. We returned to India with only 3 boundary conditions. Because we had been successful professionals, we said if we're going to go back, we have to do something meaningful with this time that we have. And the 3 were, 1, whatever we did, we would have an impact on scale. Because India has seen too many pilot programs. It had to affect the lives of millions of people. The second is that we would work on transforming urban India. Not that villages didn't have problems, but that because we were children of cities, we were born in cities, we've lived in great cities around the world, the idea of fixing our cities resonates for us. And the third is that we would use our professional skills. My wife's is in planning and architecture, mine is in banking and finance. And that was it. And the last 14 years has been this incredibly enriching, fulfilling journey about trying to make a difference. And we've learned as much about ourselves as we've learned about India, its past, its future, its possibilities, its mysteries, and so on. So that's the background. Over these 14 years, we've built 4 institutions, all of which are focused on urban reforms, but are taking different institutional forms to address this, different challenges of urban India. And I'll just take a few minutes to talk about these institutions and share one or two examples to give you my concluding thoughts. We have one called Janagraha, which is focused on transforming quality of life in our cities and towns. And we think in order to fix quality of life in our cities, it's an incredibly complicated problem. The garbage is not as simple as it seems. The traffic jams are not as simple. Cities around the world are complex systems, and the good cities and the great cities build those complex response systems really well. So what we are embarked upon in Janagraha is to try and work both with government and with citizens to try and fix this. So we run a lot of programs around this, 7 programs specifically, and we've run it for the last 10 years, that are addressing different aspects. So let me give you a couple of examples. I don't know how many of you know, when we talk about voter turnout in our cities, and we keep saying urban apathy, nothing could be further than the truth, from the truth. The quality of the voter list in our cities is completely wrong, broken. Error rates in our urban voter lists are over 60%. And the reason that the error rates are 60% is not because of some apathetic bureaucrat, because the system by which the voter list is managed was meant for a static rural India. Once a year, the Tehsildar would land up and read out the list in a panchayat, assisted by the school teachers, and the delta, the change in the list would barely be 1 or 2 names, because Munshi Bai would have passed away, or Kanu Bain would have gone off and got married, and that's it. And you take that 19th century system and transplant it into urban India, any place in Chennai or Bangalore or Bhilai, with hundreds of thousands of people coming into the city and moving around in the city, and the system is overwhelmed. So what you're seeing is tens of thousands of names that every year have to be deleted, tens of thousands of names that need to be added. You need a new system to handle this kind of flux. So we're working in an unprecedented MOU with the Election Commission of India to actually fix this problem. Over the last 4 years, we've taken one constituency in Bangalore and we've moved the voter list accuracy from 45% to 75%. And our very simple metric is, in the next election, and hopefully assembly elections could happen next week in Karnataka or in May, but in the next assembly elections, we want to show that turnout in that constituency is 20% higher than the rest of Bangalore. Because it puts to rest this myth that this citizen is apathetic. The citizen isn't apathetic. I've not met a single apathetic citizen in India. We're all like pressure cookers, boiling with things to say but nowhere to say it. So what we're hoping is we'll solve that, and with that we'll then build a scalable model which can go across urban India and clean the voter lists over the next 10 years in all our cities, so that the first step of a democracy can truly be exercised. That's just one example. Like this, we run 7 programs. We are the knowledge partner for the IAS Academy in Mussoorie. We also do a very interesting thing with school kids. We run a program called Bala Janagraha, where we've taken over the 8th standard class, and we don't do anything on civics about Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha, but we have written a textbook called Me and My City, which tells children where does the water supply come from, what happens to the sewage, to take a look at the waste treatment plant and so on. Today, we started with one school 8 years ago. This year, we're in 146 schools. 11,000 children go through that program. And last year, we built a franchise model for it, because then it can scale beyond us. So this year, we're running it in Patna, Ludhiana, Pune, and Hyderabad. Our goal over the next 5 years is about 5,000 schools, 100 of which we'll run ourselves. The remaining 4,900 will be run by partners who are like us and who care about the country. That's in Janagraha. My wife has started something called India Urban Space, which is focused on transforming how cities are planned in our country. So she's done the master plan for Jaipur. She won the highest civilian award from the government of Rajasthan for that. She's currently doing master plans for 5 towns. But most importantly, she is now building the blueprint with the Planning Commission and the Ministry of Urban Development for how cities should be planned in India. The policy environment for planning, the protocols of how planning should be done, so that that can then have a scale impact on the ground. Besides these 2, I'm involved in 2 social businesses which are addressing quality of life for the poor, because they can't wait for a generation for these reforms to take place. One of which is a microfinance institution in which Nachiket has been a great friend and an advisor and a big support. In fact, the Fino institution he referred to has been a big help for us. And another one is on affordable housing, where we're building housing for the poor at a price point that they can afford. Our first project has just been completed, 480 units of 400 square feet at 5 lakhs in Bangalore. And we're now embarking on 3 more projects. Now, that's the background. This work over the last 14 years consumes me. I spend 18 hours a day non-stop for the last 14 years. I was extremely successful in the private sector, but nothing that I ever did in the private sector comes even close to what this asks of you. So, the first thing is, and I loved what Swami Bodhananda said, that the challenges of a society should inspire us to do more. They demand more of us. And I can tell you, this is intensely demanding. This is not something that you do on a Friday afternoon. And Nachiket said this as well, passion is a necessary but not sufficient ingredient for change. So, and the second part is, there are remarkable people in government. There are extraordinarily talented, dedicated, honest people in government. They are no different from us. And they are in fact even more isolated than we are, because we are every day dumping all this, the debris of our criticism on them. So, if we can find a way to reach out to them, to shake hands with them and to work together, then I think real magic can happen. There are a lot of stories of frustration, of difficulty, of challenges, but my wife and I have chosen to think about the positives, because that's what carries you. We have been blessed by the goodwill of so many people over the last 10 to 14 years that you can't count it. One of them, in fact, Irina was a panelist just in the earlier session. We have a jury for a program that we are running. Out of the blue, on a Monday morning, I called her. And I said, Irina, we'd like you to be on the jury. It requires some amount of her time. And immediately she says, yes, I'll be there. And by the way, thank you for making my Monday. So, like this, there are so many people. You just need to be able to reach out with a childish sense of naivete and belief that we can change our society. So, I'll close by saying, does India have challenges? Of course it does. Does India have many promises? Yes, it does. But it's ultimately up to each of us to say, let's look at the positive, let's give everything that we have to this great country that gave us the opportunity to sit here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ramesh, for a very, very inspiring talk. I must say, I know you for so many years. I still didn't know many aspects of your life that you shared with us. It's really quite inspiring to hear your own journey and what you've been able to accomplish, what people may, in many, many years of work are not able to do. That's just wonderful. So, my thought was, we have about half an hour with us. We have a wonderful audience right here. Why don't we throw this open for a conversation on this with all of you.